What's up world, Jeff Lerner here, and we're gonna shoot a quick video here about how reading, that thing you do with those things, books, how it helps your mind. Now, before we get into it, this is actually gonna be a pretty jam-packed video with a lot of awesome analysis of reading and the way it works in the brain and the different lobes and systems and nodes and glands that reading activates and how it activates them and how it connects them and how it makes you smarter and better and just all around more awesome. But before we get into that, let me just address the elephant in the room. I'm willing to bet that this isn't the first time you've heard about how good reading is for you. Frankly, you probably wouldn't be watching a video about it if you'd never actually heard it before. I suppose, I'm guessing. What word are you looking for, Jeff? See, I need to read more, and it helps all these systems in the brain. But my guess is if you're watching this video, it's because you want to be reminded how good reading is for you so that you will be encouraged and reinforced to do more of it. In other words, we're not having a problem of understanding. There's not a knowledge gap here. Now I'm going to fill in a lot of details and hopefully make it cool and really spell it out. But the reality is you already know reading is good for you, or else you probably wouldn't be watching this video. So what's the elephant in the room? You're watching a video about how reading is good for you instead of just reading. You get it? It's kind of ironic. But we all know reading is good for us. But instead, we go on YouTube and we watch videos that tell us that reading is good for us to hopefully reinforce and build this habit, build this muscle that like next time we'll actually just go read the book. So what I'm gonna suggest is totally soak up this video. Give me a lot of love. Give me really good watch time. Help me in the YouTube algorithm. Give me a like, subscribe to my channel. Give me 5, well, I guess you can't give multiple likes. It's not like a Facebook Live, but just totally soak up this video. Don't turn it off now. That'll actually hurt me. Give me, however long this ends up being, like watch the whole darn thing. And then turn off YouTube. I promise by the end of this video, I will have given you like ample support for the idea that that's good for you, but frankly, you already know that. So make this video the last YouTube video you watch for like 30 days and say, hey, for 30 days, I'm just gonna read books. Whatever time I had in my life to watch videos on YouTube, I'm gonna do the same thing with books. So frankly, there's a lot of the same information, but as we're about to discover, getting it from books does a lot of different things in the brain. And to be clear, this is not a video about how reading short blog posts on screens on the internet are good for us. I'm talking good old-fashioned books, ink on paper. Forgive me, that was a little bit of a preachy preamble, but we can all probably agree it needed to be said. That said, let's get into the video and learn about all the ways that reading is so good for us and good for our brain. All right, you're still here. Great. So my my intro wasn't so off-putting that you closed out the video. I'm saying it to myself too. Like that's the thing. I mean, the world we live in, it's so easy to just look at screens all the darn time. But yeah, let's read some books. First of all, I will say I actually have a pretty good track record in my life of reading a lot of books, and I have reaped huge benefits from reading books. That shelf back there is stocked with books that I have actually read, and I have other shelves at my home, in my garage, even in storage of books that I have actually read. I've read, I'm not one of those people that counts. I'm not Warren Buffett who says I read 85 books a year or whatever. I don't have a number, but I've read a lot of books. I've definitely read hundreds of books. I might have read over 1,000 books. I've been an avid reader ever since I was a kid, and especially in my teens. It was actually great. I was a typical teen. And I got kind of depressed. Like teens are moody, right? But thankfully, one of the ways that I coped was I read. I kind of got into the world and stimulated. As it turned out, even as I was moping through my teenage years, I was actually stimulating my imagination. I was actually making myself smarter. I was actually learning a ton of stuff that I ended up retaining some of. And now I'm 41 years later, I blurt out these facts and relevant tidbits and conversation, and people think, oh, this guy like knows a lot of stuff. It's literally because for 30 years, I've at some level just medicated through some hard times by reading. And plus I've always also been really intentional and strategic about reading, and I've learned how valuable it is, and I've experienced how valuable it is, and I've made it a real, foundational part of my life. And that's really what this video is about. That said, this video is going to give you a lot of specific ways that reading is really, really great. So what I'm gonna do is kind of introduce a breakdown of the different things we're going to talk about, and then I'll go into each of these subjects in more depth and really explain how the process works and why it's so good for you. We're going to talk about specific, not just how reading affects your life, but I'm really interested in how reading specifically affects the brain, because I don't know, maybe it's just me, but the more I understand how things work and why things work, it allows me to sort of really trust the process. I think it's, it's like, same thing with, with exercise, like getting a little bit of a working knowledge of exercise science and metabolism and blood sugar and, muscle breakdown and repair and sleep and all, diet and nutrition. Actually understanding it makes it easier to just do the darn work and do the things you should do, right? That's why do people study exercise? Why do people study the body? It's not just so they can know, it's so they can do. You're more likely to do differently when you understand and you have the scientific or detailed background, right? So that's why we're going to do this. I'm going to really talk about how reading affects the brain. I'm going to talk about how reading reduces stress levels. I'm going to first hopefully convince you that it does, and then I'll explain how it does it. I'm going to talk about how a specific type of reading can actually increase your empathy. And as a brief aside, I won't take a ton of time to dwell on this, but I will say that I thought I was pretty smart for a long time. I thought I was pretty competent and skilled at certain things that were really valuable for a long time. And I had a lot of belief in those things, but what I didn't have was the results to necessarily support those things. I was one of those people that was much smarter, in my own mind at least, than his results would indicate. I was broke. Like from the outside looking in, is that this guy's kind of a loser. Like he talks fast and seems to have a pretty decent vocabulary, but like his life kind of sucks. If there's one thing that shifted that in my life, it was probably increasing my level of empathy. Because when you increase your level of empathy, it changes the way you deal with people. It changes the way people feel when they deal with you. And that creates a whole world of possibilities that have nothing to do with how smart you are. And in fact, they can amplify your skills and abilities and knowledge and the hard work that you might be doing. They amplify them times the power of positive, healthy relationships, which if I've learned anything through doing some things well since I had that moment and that change and worked hard on that change and continue to work hard on that change, if I've learned anything, it's that you're not going to accomplish a whole lot without enrolling other people. Empathy helps you do that. So, and we're going to look at how reading, a certain type of reading can help you increase empathy. Super valuable skill. And that's the thing. I'm not going to make this video all about making more money. A lot of my stuff is about business and finance, making money, entrepreneurialism, all that stuff. But I will just tell you that every single one of these things will help you make more money in a measurable way. Reducing stress allows you more energy, allows you to work harder, make more money. Increasing empathy, build better relationships, increase your network, make more money. The next one is how reading specifically can increase imagination, creativity, and decision making. It's all kind of one cluster of attributes in the brain. And it's probably pretty obvious, say, if I have a bigger imagination, I'm more creative, I'm better at problem solving, I'm better at connecting solutions and ideas that other people haven't put together, so I can be first to market, or I can have an innovation or a unique idea. I'm better at making decisions and thus following through. You can't follow through on a decision that you haven't made, and making better decisions because you're able to sort of intuitively connect pieces. All that stuff obviously helps you make more money, especially if you want to build a business or launch an idea, do something that's not just cookie cutter being told what to do every day. By reading, improving those things, it's pretty obvious to see how they can help you make more money. We're actually going to look at a specific way, a specific type of reading that can improve your speaking ability. I have been told that I'm a pretty decent natural speaker, and I very much attribute this one type of reading that I did for a very long time, and I now still do intentionally, to sort of the basic layer of ability that I have to naturally speak. And then obviously you do a lot of work on top of that to enhance your abilities. And I had no idea at the time, but there was a different reason that I was doing this one type of reading. And as it turns out, it really helps improve your speaking ability. Reading also, we'll talk about how it can improve your memory. Again, a zillion ways that a better memory helps you make more money. Like, how about, for example, when you walk up to somebody who's potentially an important business relationship or a sales prospect or whatever, and you can actually remember their name. Reading helps you do that. And then how reading also helps you get better sleep. Again, as a personal aside, that since my business, the current business that I'm running at the time that I'm shooting this video, has really scaled up. We've scaled about 700% in growth in the last 4 months. We're on an upward slope that I'm looking at going, man, I gotta manage all this. We're adding staff, we're expanding systems, we're launching new products and services. I'm doing a lot more. I launched a podcast. I'm having people on my show. We actually post the video interviews here on this YouTube channel. I'm also doing guest appearances on other people's shows. There's a lot going on. I'm married. I have a wife. I have 4 kids. I actually like to be with them. I work out. I'm adamant about working out every day. A big part of my platform and my core philosophy is around taking care of the physical part of your life too. It's interwoven through all my training. Like, I can't let myself become a fat slob, or I'll be a hypocrite and I won't be credible when I say what I say and I sell what I sell. Like, all these reasons that my life is getting insanely busy. Well, what's the choke point when your life gets super busy? What's the one non-negotiable thing that you usually bump up against and go, I need more hours in the day. I don't have enough time. What's the biggest reason? Because 1/3 of most people's lives, or more in some cases, is usually required for sleep. Wouldn't it be a great way to get more done if you could reduce your sleep requirement by 10 or 20%? There's virtually no other adjustment you could make in your life that would probably create as much additional potential energy than to even slightly reduce your need for sleep. And the way you reduce your need you can never actually reduce your need for sleep. The body needs X amount of quality sleep, but what you can do is you can compress the amount of time that it takes you to get that quality sleep. You can make it so that you fall asleep faster. You can make it so that you enter REM sleep faster. You can make it so that you sleep harder. You can make it so that you wake up faster. And if you shave an hour at the front and an hour at the back, I promise you, as somebody who has been able to pack his sleep down to between 5 and 6 hours a night and still operate, with more energy and more creativity and my neurons firing faster, it feels like, than I ever have before. That's one way reading can really, really help you improve all aspects of your life and make more money, is if you can compress the amount of time that it takes you to get really quality sleep. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different ways that reading is going to improve your life. It's going to improve your mind and potentially help you generate more income. So hopefully you're excited to dive into each one of those and learn more about how it works. Okay, so first of all, let's just talk about really what happens in the brain when we read. I think this is so cool. Basically, the brain is like, think of the brain as like the most ridiculously complex symphony orchestra ever. Like, if you've ever been to the symphony and seen like Wagner, or the giant, like mega, like a Mahler symphony, the mega romantics. I was a music major. I'm a professional musician, so I kind of geek out on. I'm probably saying words that you're like, I don't know who those people are. They used really, really big orchestras, like 120 person orchestras with like 7 different timpanists and different types of cymbals and gongs and 8 different oboes and every single brass instrument, and there's a tuba and there's a baritone saxophone. It's so easy for me to geek out on the music stuff. The point is, they use really, really big, complicated orchestras, but yet even the most complicated orchestra holds no candle to the complexity of the brain. The brain is just, oh my gosh, it's so amazing. I wish they could make like a light show out of the brain and we could see it. Have you ever seen those Christmas light shows that are like coordinated to music with lights firing up everywhere? Imagine the brain was that. How beautiful would that be? Well, when you read, you stimulate the entire, all the instruments of the orchestra, almost all the instruments of the orchestra, to play in harmony. And it's super cool. So just to kind of quickly touch on the various things going on in the brain when you read, and very lightly even just suggest the complexity and the beauty of it, the elegance of it, let me just kind of walk you through a few things. So first of all, you have something called the temporal lobe. And the temporal lobe is actually, like my temporal lobe right now is firing a zillion miles an hour. It's the thing that drives what's called phonology, or phonological awareness. And it's basically the understanding of how sounds fit together. So fit, g, z, this thing, with the tongue and the lip, together, fit together. Just to say fit together, my temporal lobe had to fire like 900 times, right? You have not just the sounds, but the sounds relate to letters and word structures, what they call phonemes. You have a letter like, what's an example? You have a letter like E, And if you just see the letter E, it's like eh or E. And then you have an R, which is ah, which is actually starts with an ah, which is actually more like an A, ah, which is actually like a with a little trill at the end, This is really fun. But you put them together and it's not R, it's just You put them together, E-R equals right? So your sounds, but they're anchored in letters, they're anchored in symbols, they're anchored in shapes, and you assemble them all really fast. And that's called phonology. And that's all happening in the temporal lobe of the brain. And that is like wildly fired by reading, because when you read, you're actually, even if you're not speaking, and we're going to talk a little more about reading aloud here in a minute, but it's all happening in the brain. You're actually hearing, the temporal lobe is still processing the phonology, the sound of the words, even if you're not actually saying them and your ears aren't actually hearing them. So that's happening in the temporal lobe. Then you have the frontal lobe, which basically, if I were to say to you, the cat in jumps the morning. What? The cat in jumps the morning. The cat morning in jumps the cat. Jumps in morning the. I'm using words. Are you saying that the cat jumps in the morning? My frontal lobe kind of knew what you were saying, but it was going, his grammar is all out of whack, right? So the frontal lobe actually has these trained rules. Remember when you were in school and you were diagramming sentences and the adjective goes here and the preposition goes here? That was actually teaching a systematic way of analyzing language to the frontal lobe. And your frontal lobe was soaking all that up, and it's still working at 1,000,000 miles an hour anytime you're speaking or anytime you're reading, right? So you're syncing your phonological awareness in the temporal lobe with your grammar and your comprehension structures in the frontal lobe, and poof, it's like magic, right? But then on top of it all, you have the angular and the supramarginal gyrus doing this little dance, and those are two structures within what's called the parietal lobe that basically operates as like the reading integrator, right? So this is like think of it as like the astronaut at the cockpit of the shuttle who's like, oh yeah, we need to, boost the thrusters, and we need to like adjust the rudders, and we need to, whatever, I don't know, increase air pressure or cabin pressure or whatever astronauts do, right? It's the person coordinating all the pieces, right? So the angular and supramarginal gyrus are passing all this information back and forth, and they're actually the ones directing the temporal lobe and directing the frontal lobe to say, okay, C plus A plus T equals cat. You don't have to stop and think about it, right? It's like the integrator, right? It's the processing system that's making it so that you don't even have to be conscious of the individual pieces of the ideas and the structures that you're melding together as you read, okay? And listen, I could keep going. I could get like super geeky. I mean, and by the way, I don't know all this stuff. I had to research it and make notes and stuff, but I could go research it more and make even more notes and get even more geeky and strange about what happens in the brain when you're reading. Hopefully I've got you convinced though that it's a really, really beautiful thing. There is magic happening in the mind when you read. So you might imagine why you're getting smarter when you do it. And by the way, very little of what I just described is happening right now with you watching this video. Again, not to dog on watching videos too much, because I have a YouTube channel and I like when people watch videos, and I even get paid because people watch videos. None of this magic that I'm talking about is happening while you're watching this YouTube video. So as I suggested, when you get to the end of this video, stop watching videos for a while and do that orchestral music there that I just described. There was a 6-month study at Carnegie Mellon that actually proved, and I think this is super cool, that reading increases white matter in the brain. And you might not know what white matter is. White matter is basically the circuitry layer. So if you ever I don't know if you've ever been in a circuit room or a server room or anything, you'll see these panels, right? And you open up the panel, and beneath the panel, there's just this giant mass, this giant nest of wires and circuits going everywhere, right? Like if you're in networking or IT or something, you definitely know what I'm talking about. It's just kind of this below the surface, only instead of wiring, instead of copper and rubber wires, in the brain you have what are called axons, which are nerve fibers that are, they're nerves, and they're surrounded by this, this stuff called myelin, which is has electrical conductivity. Myelin is white, has a whitish hue. That's why the circuitry of the brain is called white matter. And they've actually, sorry, I got a nose itch. They've actually shown that reading causes the brain to grow more axons and get denser, increase the density of your white matter. Now, I always heard that you can't grow new brain brain fibers. Like if you have brain damage, it'll heal and the mind will kind of repartition its processing, but you can't fundamentally actually grow new nerves in the brain. And even in the central nervous system, that's why spinal injuries are so problematic. They don't grow back. Reading can help. It's pretty, when you put it in that context, it's pretty darn amazing to go, wow, reading literally grows new circuits in the brain. And then on top of that, while reading is doing all this amazing stuff in the brain, it's also doing amazing things in the body. While I'm shooting this video, there is a pandemic going on in the world called COVID-19. You probably well remember it. And the beautiful thing about these videos is they last for years and years, but I'm sure you probably remember COVID-19. So one thing that everybody's really concerned about right now is their immune system. Is there anything cooler, any greater hack than the idea that, by the way, while you're doing all this stuff to get smarter and more empathetic and more quick-witted and all these, and becoming a better speaker and doing all these things that are going to help you make more money and sleep better and have more energy, you can also literally improve your immune system by reading.
How does that work, Jeff? Come on, really? That's a stretch.
Reading has been proven to reduce stress by up to 68%. Well, what does that actually technically mean to reduce stress? It means it has a biochemical, a physiological significance from the standpoint it reduces the spikes of adrenaline, epinephrine, and cortisol, which are basically the three sympathetic nervous system chemicals that cause you to go into fight or flight mode, right? Adrenaline, epinephrine, and cortisol. What happens when adrenaline, epinephrine, and cortisol are released? It does all kinds of things. It increases your heart rate, it dilates your pupils, it agitates your muscular energy. And one of the things that it does, in order to have your muscles ready for you to move, like if a bear charges at you, you gotta be ready to move, right? One of the ways that it does that is it floods your blood with glucose, which is great if you need to outrun a bear, that you have glucose so that you can do a 2-minute sprint. But generally speaking, it's really not super awesome to be walking around with glucose excess glucose in your blood. That is actually kind of one of the things also happens if you have diabetes, right? Because you don't have insulin to balance the glucose in your blood. It's correlated with heart disease, it's correlated with metabolic syndrome. In general, the over-release or the spiking of adrenaline, epinephrine, and cortisol disrupts your immune system very significantly. So they did this study, and forgive me, I don't actually remember where they did the study, but you can look it up. If you look at reading reduces stress study, like Google that, you'll get all the background data on what I'm about to say. But they compared all the traditional things that people do to reduce stress, right? They compared listening to music, they compared going for a walk, they compared having a relaxing cup of tea, they compared yoga, meditation, and guess what smoked all of those things? Reading. Reading blew them out of the water. And they think it has something to do with the fact that it's such an active form of relaxation because it's so stimulating to the brain, all those moving parts that I was describing. It's like a massage for your brain, while at the same time allowing your body this sort of general settling and ability to, metaphorically at least, exhale, simultaneously keeping the brain super active. And so it stabilizes all those hormones that are actually governed within the brain, right? Adrenal gland, I think those are adrenal hormones. But anyway, so because you have this like activation of the brain combined with relaxation of the body, it's a more effective type of relaxation in terms of stress reduction than just purely things that are relaxing, if that makes sense. Reading reduces stress by up to 68%. Reducing stress by up to 68% makes you way more awesome in a lot of different ways. And then, as promised, I'm also going to explain to you how reading can increase your empathy, which improves connection, relationships, the way people feel when they interact with you, and has all kinds of probably pretty obvious benefits. But there's a specific type of reading that increases empathy. And actually this was significant for me because it was the type of reading that I had actually moved away from, because I'm sort of a really practical person, and I want, correlate reading a lot. I want to learn, I want to grow, I want to up-level my skills, I want to develop personally and professionally. And so I like to read a lot of nonfiction. But as it turns out, reading fiction has certain qualitative benefits in life and in the mind that reading nonfiction doesn't have, which I actually was pretty stoked to hear because I love reading fiction. I had just really tapered off on doing it because I was wanting to be so efficient and effective about using reading as a tool. So apparently reading fiction specifically increases empathy, which, like I said, was exciting for me. And I've started reading fiction again because of this, because as I also said, empathy is basically, I believe, empathy is a superpower. The more of it you have, and here's the problem. This is a totally separate video probably, but I'm just going to say this. A lot of people confuse empathy with being emotional. And I don't believe those are even remotely the same thing. In fact, I think that really emotional people very often, they get flooded and they're no longer being logical or rational, and they start behaving in a way that, although it may seem empathetic because in the moment it may align with a certain cause that would be consistent with empathy, it's not actually of itself empathy, because it's not based on the needs of others, it's based on the feelings of the person having the feelings. Emotional behavior is not empathetic behavior. But like I said, that's a subject for a whole other video. But as long as you kind of frame it that way, empathy is a hugely valuable skill. I think it's a superpower. So anything that increases empathy, it's like increasing Superman's strength, right? Like if Superman, you know, they always say positive psychology says play to your strengths. Don't worry about so much about shoring up your weaknesses. Just figure out what you're good at and lean into it, right? So if empathy is a strength and you can actually have more of it through reading fiction, that's a great thing. So here's how that actually works. When you read, like we talked about, your mind has to process these words and these letters and these ideas, and it creates structures or creates conceptual structures. But then the left part of the temporal cortex, which is within that temporal lobe, actually takes those conceptual structures and it creates what we've all experienced, which is it creates images around the ideas. This is, you know, why kids love reading so much. Those that are exposed to it, and they're exposed to it in a healthy way. They're not pressured. It doesn't carry all this baggage or strings attached or, you know, approval or judgment from their parents or whatever. But kids that are allowed to just healthily express an experience or a love of reading, the reason they like it is because it stimulates their imagination and they create these pictures. Well, what happens is when you have those pictures, the left temporal cortex creates these images and then it attaches them to your emotional memories, which are stored in the amygdala, which is a very old, very powerful part of the brain. And there's a couple reasons why this is so important. So what it does is it takes these images that it creates based on the story that's happening, because it's a fictional story. You don't have any pictures associated with it, so the mind can't, because it's fiction, it's never actually happened before, so you've never seen it. So the mind can't help but fill it out with pictures. This is why if they like make a movie out of a book and you watch the movie first and then you go read the book, you've actually let your left temporal cortex off the hook, because your mind is inevitably going to apply the images from the movie to the story in the book, right? But if you don't have the movie, your left temporal cortex has to fill in the blank or fill in the gap and come up with these images. And then it attaches, because anytime we look at an image, the mind immediately cross-references it against our bank of experience. And if it finds a fit, then anytime you revisit the past, you revisit your bank of experience, you activate the amygdala, which has emotional memories, because we generally connect feelings with experiences from our past, right? That's not new news. What you're essentially doing is creating a mechanism to activate your emotional memory to essentially get some level of control or enhanced awareness of the processes of the amygdala, even though you don't describe it in that language. By accessing intentionally your emotional memory bank, you're getting some sort of heightened awareness of the amygdala. And here's why this is so important. The amygdala doesn't just, well, this is actually related to the storage of emotional memories, but it's not just about generating feelings when we read books. The amygdala is also the thing that stops us when we want to take risks. We want to take risks, and what happens? We say, I want to start a business, which this is why I'm so familiar with the amygdala, because I feel like I'm fighting people's amygdalas all the time, because I'm teaching people how to start businesses. I'm teaching people how to take calculated risks. I'm teaching people how to get control of certain aspects of their life, and they're having these impulses in their mind saying, no, don't do that. Don't go outside. Stay in the cave. There could be a lion out there. Stay safe, right? They're accessing their memory bank of something their parents told them, or sometime that they felt scared, or they're worried about how they're going to look, or they don't want to be embarrassed. They're scared of failure. All this stuff that's around emotions stored in our memory bank, and that's the amygdala. And the amygdala is actually designed to keep us safe. That's the biological origin of that part of the brain. So by heightening the awareness of it and connecting to it through intentionality, through an action that we control, like reading, we're actually getting a level of control over one of the most powerful things that controls us and restricts us and limits us and stops us from hitting our other bigger goals in life, right? Really, really powerful. It's one of the most powerful things about reading, that once I learned reading fiction increases empathy by giving me images that I can use to get heightened awareness of my amygdala, my emotional memory. I was like, okay, boom. Honestly, first thing I did, literally the first thing I did after I read that, well, in terms of reading, the first book I went and read after I learned this, I went back and reread Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. Again, subject for another video of why I love that book and why I love Ayn Rand in general. It's like 1,100 pages, and it's so vividly descriptive. It's a great book that lends itself to creating a lot of imagery and stimulating a lot of feelings, especially for someone who's an entrepreneurial capitalist like me, which is kind of a theme of the book. And so I saw so much and I felt so much, and I developed this increased awareness around my amygdala, and I literally noticed, and I actually think this is why entrepreneurs like Ayn Rand, it's not just because her ideas support them ideologically, I think it's because her imagery enhances their ability to master the fear associated with taking the risks that she ideologically aligns with, right? Like I said, subject for another book, or another video, probably another book, but that's the power of connecting with the amygdala. So, and this is not just a cool idea. So the guy at University of Toronto, Keith something, can't remember his name, developed this thing called the theory of the mind. If you Google theory of the mind, you'll find all this data. But he basically did a big study around empathy. They can test for empathy, and essentially they found that the strongest predictor of increased levels of empathy within an otherwise like population is literally who reads more fiction than the other party. Pretty powerful. And then there's more. Like, who knew that reading was so cool? And frankly, I'll be honest, when I decided to make a video on how reading impacts the mind, I had no idea it was going to turn into whatever this turns into, 40, 50, 60-minute video about all the awesome ways that reading impacts the mind. Like, I knew it was cool, but I don't even think I knew it was that cool. Next, we're going to talk about how it improves imagination, creativity, and memory. That one, just even if it was just memory, that would be huge, right? How much more valuable, or how valuable is it in life to have an improved memory? You know, some of the most successful people in the world, that's one of the things people say about it. I can think of a few people from history. There's John D. Rockefeller, there's Bill Clinton, there's Warren Buffett is often talked about, Bill Gates as well. People say they just have such quick and powerful recall of people's names and things they read. Memory is hugely correlated with success. Here's the basic structure of how that works. So you have the occipital lobe, and your occipital lobe is your visual processing center. And so, clearly reading involves a lot of scanning with your eyes for information, and you're having to process all this stuff really fast. And then we access the parietal lobe, which I talked about earlier, because that's where both the angular and supramarginal gyruses were, which as I called those the reading integrators, the C plus A plus T equals cat. What's happening is you're connecting symbols into, I don't know what you call them, like units of meaning. You're taking unrelated symbols, or symbols that inherently don't have meaning, like the C plus the A plus the T, or have a large variety of potential meanings, and you're assembling them into an elemental unit that has a specific meaning, a cat, and then you're assembling lots of those units and combining various meanings into a larger meaning, the cat jumps in the morning, and that's all happening in the parietal lobe, but it's having to pull all of its data from the occipital lobe, right? So think about that. What you're doing is you're scanning a system for information. In this case, the system is the pages of a book, and you're pulling in all these tiny little data points, which is literally every letter, every punctuation mark, every unit of spacing. Even when we say, oh, I jumped to the next paragraph, the little indentation mark, which is just a little centimeter of space that tells us something. Oh, it's a new idea, right? And we're assembling all this information with the parietal lobe. What is it that creativity and innovation, and let's take a guy like Elon Musk, for example. He scanned his environment, pulled a lot of the same data that other people did, whether it was when he started PayPal or when he started Tesla or when he started SpaceX or when he decided to drill tunnels under LA, like whatever thing he does, he's scanning the same information that a lot of other people are. But what's he doing? He's putting it together he's combining data points that inherently don't have meaning into ideas that do, and he's combining those ideas into larger ideas that somehow for him create meaning that they don't necessarily create for other people. So basically we're saying his occipital lobe and his parietal lobe, his angular and supramarginal gyrus dancing in harmony, is creating these ideas and these connections that other people's aren't. I don't actually know Elon Musk's reading habits, but I'm gonna go ahead and call it. The guy probably reads a lot. And I actually do know that when he was younger, he did read a lot. He was into comic books. A great example of how reading essentially mimics processes that have a ton of commercial value in the real world, right? And thus, reading improves imagination, creativity, and even memory, because memory is basically the ability to do those things in reverse. Makes sense? Take those ideas and remember the occipital lobe, essentially reverse, hey, I see a person. I remember the face. I can connect that face to a name. Same process, only in reverse, right? Reading helps you be more imaginative, creative, and have a better memory. Next, we're going to talk about how reading does, one of the greatest gifts reading has done for me is that it improves your ability to speak. I remember when I was young actually being at a doctor's office. And if you've watched many of my videos, you probably agree I'm a fairly loquacious person. Like words just kind of bubble from me, and I talk a lot, and I speak reasonably well. I speak pretty fast. I seem to juggle a lot in my mind. It's my thing. Look, I suck at a lot of things, like pretty badly. But speaking, something I do reasonably well. And I remember when I was a kid, I was maybe 14, 13, I don't know, that age, super awkward, I know that. I was in a doctor's office, and the doctor said to my mom, "How old is he?" And she answered the question. She was like, "Oh, wow, and he speaks like he's 25, right?" Because I was just talking. I've always spoken a lot and with good flow and reasonable sophistication, I guess, beyond my age, especially when I was young. It's literally because I read a lot. I suppose there was a native ability, but it was like I read so much. I remember one of my earliest memories is when I was 2. My mom sitting on my bed reading me The Cat in the Hat from Dr. Seuss and teaching me to read. And eventually we memorized the whole book. We could say it without reading it. And then I took the book, so this is when I was 2, took the book back. And now that I had it all memorized, I went back and applied what I knew it said to reverse engineer what the words meant and how the words, what the sounds were and the letters were and all that. And by 3, I was actually reading pretty fluently. And ever since then, when you're young and you do something well, like, if you're young and you're the fastest kid in the class and you win the race and you always get picked first at sports, what happens? You end up playing more sports, right? So when I was young, reading was a strength. So I ended up doing a lot more of it because frankly, like I say, I sucked at a lot of other things and I didn't like feeling bad. I liked feeling good like most kids. And so I did things that I was good at, and reading was one of those things. And there was a point I remember in 4th grade when I really, really wanted to get this part in the school play. It was like just called the Peanut Gallery, and I really wanted to be Charlie Brown. It was like a, Snoopy and the Peanuts thing, right? I really wanted to be Charlie Brown. And so the whole semester, I got the script and I was walking around reading, and I was reading out loud because I was like getting ready to rehearse for this part. That semester, I noticed some things happening. I'd be sitting at lunch. I'd be sitting in the lunchroom when I guess in 4th grade, you're 10. I just felt less nervous. And I was a super awkward, insecure, shy kid. I felt less nervous. I felt more able to talk to people and connect to people. I made the connection, hey, all this reading out loud that I've been doing because I really want to get this part in this school play has literally made me better socially and in terms of relationship development, which ultimately I would discover was actually really important to success in life. And I connected these 2 dots, which was important for me because although I was very good at reading, I was very, very bad at relationship building and maintaining friendships. Frankly, I got bullied a lot. Like I was super awkward. It was a hard time. So reading out loud specifically became this thing that I would do as sort of a developmental exercise because I decided that it made me better with people. It helped offset some of my insecurity and my shyness and awkwardness. And so I just developed this habit of like, when I read aloud. When I was 16 years old, I got mono for a semester at boarding school. And I literally, all I did For an entire semester, they exempted me from all my classes. So, and I went to boarding school, so I was alone, had no friends. First week of school, I get diagnosed with mono, so I'm not even allowed to go to classes and make any friends. I'd actually gotten a little better at that point at making friends, but it was a new school. I had none, and I wasn't allowed to go make any because I was sick, and they wanted me to stay in the dorm. So I was basically shut in a dorm for 3 months in a new school where I didn't know anyone. And what could I do? All I did was play guitar and read out loud. For 3 months. Just read out loud, read out loud, read out loud. When I went back to school the the spring semester of my junior year, 3 months of reading out loud, I was on. All the time I was on. Literally so at that point I turned 17 and I have basically been talking my way through life ever since. And I truly believe that semester, those 3 months of reading out loud, literally to break up the boredom as a way to just survive my situation, sent me on a path where I've basically never stopped talking. And most of the good things that have happened in my life have come through communication, through processes, through networking, through business, through sales, all this stuff that's rooted in talking. And so I specifically credit reading for helping me in 3 ways. If I sort of break apart what it really did for me, there's 3 things that it did for me. First of all, vocabulary. And obviously some of this depends on what books you choose to read. During those, and again, you lean into your strengths, right? So people say, oh, he has a good vocabulary. So it was like a thing I actually decided to get better at, right? So I would read out loud with a dictionary, and I would read books. I remember I read Herman Melville. I read Nathaniel Hawthorne. These are not cool books. I didn't read Dean Koontz. I didn't read Stephen King. I didn't read James Patterson. I read books that were hard to read. And I did it on purpose so that I would bump up against words I didn't know, and I would look them up, and I would underline them, and I would write the definitions, and then I would read the definitions out loud, and I would create flashcards. Like I said, 3 months being stuck in a dorm room, not being allowed to talk to him. It's actually kind of relevant now. During COVID, people are shut at home and they're not allowed to do all this stuff that they used to do. And what is everybody doing? They're just watching TV. They're consuming internet content. Meanwhile, I'm going, yeah, I remember last time I went through this 25 years ago. I made myself a whole lot smarter. So maybe I can be productive with this time, right? So I credit with helping with my vocabulary because I was very intentional about using it in that way. Helped me with improving my retention, my ability to recall. When you read out loud, think about it. We've already diagrammed all the things that happen in the brain, not all of them, but a lot of the things that happen in the brain just when you read without talking. Now add in the additional activity of moving your mouth, having to coordinate your motor skills, creating sound waves that feed back into your ears. Now you're engaging your auditory processing mechanism, feeding it back into the brain to sync up with what your eyes are seeing. It's like, if you want to up the ante on the symphony, the orchestral thing that was already happening just from reading, speak it while you read it. I don't know that there's anything you could do that activates more parts of the brain in a synchronous way than reading out loud. Basically, if you have the whole brain firing at once, what's more likely to happen? There's your retention, your ability to recall the information improves. Think about this. Think about compound movements in the gym. They say if you really want to build strength, don't go in and do curls. Don't go in and do calf raises, things where you're only flexing at one joint, right? Do things like squats, where your hips, your knees, even your lower back, all these different joints are moving at the same time. The more complex the activity is, the more it stimulates growth in the body. Ditto in the mind. The more complex the activity is in the mind, the more it stimulates growth in the mind. So again, reading while also speaking out loud. I don't think there is a thing that's more of a compound mental movement. Maybe if you're reading and doing math problems out loud, it might have some of the same net effect. And that improves your ability to retain and recall information for, like I said, obvious reasons. And then obviously the natural speaking ability, the ability to connect words, ideas, images, while motorizing it, mechanizing it with the apparatus of the mouth and the ability to create and coordinate sounds. It's probably pretty obvious why it improves your speaking ability to even if you're just reading aloud words that somebody else wrote, you're still creating that coordination that later results in, frankly, the ability to do what I'm doing right now, which is I have a few notes and I'm just talking and I'm thinking and talking and thinking and talking, right? So One more reason why reading is so powerful, and again, specifically translates into an improved business result, improved earning potential in this life. It improves your ability to speak. And the final thing that reading assists you with in the mind, at least the final thing I'm going to talk about in this video, we could probably do 8 hours or 80 hours of videos about how good reading is for your mind, is that it helps you sleep. There's a couple of ways that I have in particular found that reading helps me sleep. First of all, if you make a ritual, this is the last thing you do every day is you read, then a couple things happen. One, you're going to get your reading in every day. Two, it forces you, if your last activity of the day is something that by definition doesn't involve a screen, so clearly I'm talking about reading a book, not a Kindle or an iPad or obviously watching a TV or a computer. Reading a good old-fashioned book gets your eyes away from blue light, and blue light in the occipital lobe, which is the visual processing part of the brain that we talked about, can actually disrupt the release of melatonin from the pineal gland, and that messes with your sleep. So by creating a routine where the last thing you do every day is something that doesn't involve a screen, that right there will help you sleep better. And frankly, a lot of people need that suggestion. But also, it's actually been shown that having a ritual every single day that's the last thing that you do when it's essentially to lead into the time to sleep, as long as it's a ritual that's non-disruptive, like looking at screens, also helps trigger the pineal gland to secrete that melatonin. And then because we talked about how reading reduces stress by up to 68%, and so it actually dampens the adrenaline, cortisol, and epinephrine in your body. We know that adrenaline is pretty much the opposite of sleep. Adrenaline is like fast heart rate, increased pace of breathing, sweating, jitters. That's adrenaline, right? It's the opposite of getting tired and going to sleep. So anything that suppresses adrenaline is probably good for sleep. Anything that creates a habit that triggers melatonin from the pineal gland, good for sleep. Anything that gets you away from screens and blue light, good for sleep. So in general, reading can be a very, very powerful structure to build into your day right before bed. And that's frankly when I do a lot of my reading. I either do it then or I do it early in the morning too. Yet another way that reading is great for your life, great for your brain, great for your body, and as I said, great for your business and your income. I don't have anything else to say about reading. It could have been a longer video, could have been a shorter video, but in any case, it's done. If you have enjoyed this video, I would love it if you would give it a like. It helps me out, helps me get more of my stuff shown by YouTube if you're seeing this on YouTube. If you're not seeing this on YouTube, go to my YouTube channel. Check out, I have not only this video, I have hundreds, literally hundreds of videos. I think we're well over 300 at the time I'm creating this. Videos of just free training about anything related to making your life more awesome, making more money, improving your body, improving your health, improving your relationships, improving your communication, improving your energy, businesses, new economy business models. I talk a lot about digital marketing and the internet and the stuff that I do to create a life where I can actually sit around and make YouTube videos and still be getting paid all the time. Lots of good stuff on there. So check out the YouTube channel. Subscribe to that YouTube channel. Help me out. I do appreciate that. It encourages me and just frankly lets me know that the people out there are listening or watching, and that there's, I'm not making this in a vacuum for just myself. Although frankly, I'd probably still do that because I learned so much doing these videos. I do also have a free group on Facebook called Entrenation that is just like-minded, entrepreneurial type people that are committed to my mission of life awesomeness. See, I think I got an Entrenation hashtag on my shirt. Entrenation hashtag, right? But we have a free Facebook group. Check us out there. And then I also have a free ebook that you can get. I actually have a physical copy of it right here. But I'll email it to you, digital copy. You get it in 5 minutes. Go to millionaireshortcut.com and get your free copy there. I'm also the host of a podcast called Millionaire Secrets. Check us out. We're on Spotify, we're on Apple, we're on Google, we're on all the major podcasting platforms. Or I also post video recordings of those interviews right here on YouTube, or if you're not on YouTube, on my YouTube channel, where you can check out all the podcast interviews live. And I'm committed to this. I'm gonna keep doing my thing and keep helping people, and I appreciate any support or engagement you can show. Take care, thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next video.